Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to the first ever edition of the Keynote podcast on speaking engagement. I'm Ryan Catherwood, the publisher of Speaking Engagement, and this is our weekly podcast with some of the world's leading experts on engagement and education and other nonprofits. I'm excited to announce today's guest, John Hill. John Hill is the Vice President of Story at Whop. Many of you who are listening to this might recall that John was the higher education evangelist at LinkedIn before the network catalyst at Techstars. He seems to have a sense of where the ball is bouncing with community building and engagement, particularly amongst entrepreneurs. So I hope that you'll enjoy this conversation with John. I won't make this plug every single episode, but it is the first one. You can subscribe on the site and on Substack, going to speakingengagement.org, and we would love to have you part of our community. All right, thank you for listening. John Hill, thank you so much for being on the Speaking Engagement podcast. Give listeners who might not know about WHOP just a little flavor of what the company does.
Yeah, absolutely. We're an AI-driven platform that allows anybody to build a digital business, or actually any business at this point. End-to-end platform, so like marketplace where people can buy things similar to like a digital shopping mall on the front end. On the back end, do payment processing, customer service.
You've definitely been sort of out in front, not just with companies that are kind of leading the way in what they do, but also as someone who really has a keen sense of how to engage people yourself. Is it fair to say that you have an inclination about certain work-related community building tactics?
I think some of this comes to me intuitively, and
Yeah.
I don't know how to replicate that. There is a formulaic approach to building communities that makes people want to connect and engage into it. One is developing communities with a sense of inclusiveness. So like everybody has an opportunity to engage and connect into it. The most important thing is to have kind of a shared voice in the approach. And I think that if there's anything I did well in each one of these is I brought the stakeholders that I'm trying to position something to into the room to work with, say, our teams at LinkedIn, Techstars, at Whop, so that they understand each other, so that if you're building something to democratize entrepreneurship, you're doing it the right way. If you're building a mesh network that supports primary needs of entrepreneurs, you're doing it the right way. If you're building university as an affiliation and identification, you're doing it the right way. And so like those voices are paramount. The other thing is I just like people. I don't know how you like metric that. I enjoy the engagement. I enjoy the challenge. Like I had you in my office with Chris Marshall and the group that you are connected to, talking about alumni engagement. You all pressed back on us a little bit saying, I don't know if this is a tool for us. I love that. Like I'm not afraid of the tough conversations. And if you develop a community the right way, people feel safe to tell you what they believe and think of, and then you need to actualize it on the back end of it. But I think like if anything, I've learned how to bring parties together to do something through the organizations that I'm engaged with.
Yeah, I think that you have always done that successfully. I mean, even when you were at LinkedIn and people were just kind of figuring out that tool and how it worked and how it was relevant to alumni engagement and advancement, you were someone that people like immediately connected with as someone who like answering this fundamental challenge or problem that universities were dealing with, and doing it in a way that people felt like you were always in the room with them almost, like I'm getting that from your answer, that it's kind of like being approachable. There's a certain amount of people skill, I think, that's inherent in the business of community building. And, but also, like, as you were sort of alluding to, tactics are important, right? Doing it the right way and having objectives is important. Talk a little bit about what might surprise people about the work that you do now at WAP, about the work that you do and these different audiences where you're working to build community.
Yeah. Um, let's step back a second to LinkedIn. And I
Yeah.
actually chuckled when you were like mentioning it for a second, because there was a day where people would look at me as somebody who wasn't was coming from Silicon Valley to push something into higher education, even though I came out of higher education because I was at Michigan State University before I went to LinkedIn. And the reason I tell you this is like it's easy. Like we have this conversation easily now that everybody just uses LinkedIn.
Yep.
But back then, universities were saying, we don't believe the data that you have, or we don't want to promote what you're doing because we don't want to promote one platform over another, or we don't know if we can trust you, right? And those things were like interesting to me because I was most often the visible bridge between what was being built at LinkedIn and what we were trying to do in higher education. And there were definitely people in higher ed who were skeptical about what we were trying to do at LinkedIn. And I remember telling a good portion of people, like, I'm your voice in higher ed. LinkedIn's a vessel. It's the right vessel. It's the right tool to support what's happening with an identity of record online globally. And so like you have to be able to overcome that skepticism to engage with people. So you're part psychiatrist in the work that you're doing, where you're unwinding like what are the concerns, like where are the worries, and then you're trying to aggregate those worries into buckets, and then you're figuring out like how do I come at this from a rhetorical standpoint or from an engagement perspective, or how do we develop the right things that make them feel like we're doing the right thing? So flash forward to Whop, I'm using the same playbook at LinkedIn at Whop. If at first blush, we're a platform that was built by Gen Zs. Like the founding team built sneaker bots before they migrated eventually into allowing anybody to build a business.
It's
And
like for someone who's not
they're
sure what that is, John, what's a sneaker bot?
it allowed them to jump the line.
Okay.
It was using technology to jump the line to buy first release shoes and then resell them. So
Okay.
like
All right.
they were making money off, jumping the line to buy it in a completely legal way. It wasn't
Yeah.
anything that was nefarious. But so the average user on the platform at Whop is 18 to 25. Um, my experience at LinkedIn afforded me to tie to what Whop could be. LinkedIn became the professional identity of record that helped you get a job anywhere in the world and shifted the economic graph. So it was no longer a paper resume or a CV. The economic graph is shifting now because of the gig economy. Contract between employers and employees has shifted. The creator economy has proven out to be real, and AI is cannibalizing opportunities, particularly in front of university students right now graduating. This shift it's no longer about finding a job, it's about being the job. And
Yeah.
so you have to find platforms that afford the opportunity to do that because we're going to have to be more entrepreneurial as a society. So if that's the case, and I've seen it before at LinkedIn early days, and I can replicate it through the vessel WAP, what could happen here, then you have to figure out how do I overcome the skepticism that higher education has. And if you look at some of that, it's, some of the companies that are built on your platform don't feel like companies that I'm used to. It has a very youthful feel. But if you know where something will go, you can prepare people now to get there. And so the first thing I did was bring 100 universities in, people who worked at those universities in entrepreneurship, career services, alumni, faculty doing research, presidents of universities, and said, listen, this is where I think things are going. This is what WAP is. These things are colliding. There's going to be a professional identity of record that is the job. I think we're positioned to do this. This is much broader. And so like you start to bucket all these things back into how do I communicate back to these people in mass to drive adoption. And what I'm trying to drive right now is universities tracking and training students building digital businesses, like open that up to more people. But, like the psychologist that you have to be, even though I'm not a practice psychologist, is amazing. And again, a lot of that is honed through the experiences I've had, but part of it's intuition. I think the other thing is the blunt force approach you need for in-person engagement to drive opportunity. There's an importance of showing up. And I think like that is probably the thing that would surprise people. I'm not necessarily pulling levers through technology. I'm pulling levers through relationships by being on the ground and then seeing what those fears and concerns are, and then bringing that back to product development and making sure that we're approaching what we're doing the right way, lock in step with higher education instead of creating something saying, higher ed, come here.
Are you saying that one of the problems that you're running into when you try to talk to people in higher education about WAP is that the businesses that the students are capable of creating and somehow creates friction with the mindset of the administrators or the faculty members about the types of business they might want to teach about or align to or have knowledge of? Is that sort of where the friction points is?
Yeah, so I would say less so now. I want to get to where the concerns are so that we can meet those concerns head on and have conversation about what WAP is and what WAP isn't. What WAP isn't is the education on offline product market fit, right? Like the general business aptitude you need to build a business, like that through the education of the institution, right? WAP could be, and what we've developed, we now have 122 universities on our platform tracking and training students building digital businesses. And we're an outlet for that. But like when we devised what we were doing, we did it with universities in mind. So we have university pages, very similar to LinkedIn, where all the assets that the universities could have, a digital accelerator, a community forum that we developed for them, and then whatever else they want to add, but they can connect the students to that page. That's their landing page. It allows them to see students are generating whatever type of businesses, the impact effect. The second thing that we did is we got directly into curriculum. So University of South Carolina, Indiana University, Michigan State University, we're in the eShip programs where students are getting on a platform because we're free to individual and institution. So there's no really overhead to attach to that, where students can learn those principles of product market fit on a real company. And on the back end, we're doing experiential activities. I used to be the internship and experiential director at Michigan State University. I love this kind of stuff. Mirrored it after like Startup Weekend, the experiences that I supported at Techstars, where over a 3-hour period, students are coming in, 100 students come in, they build on WAP. And then the university gives prizes for the best storefront, best business idea, first customer. And those are real companies going out. So from like a KPI perspective, that's business generation. So we have a curricular approach, we have an institutional umbrella, and we have an experiential approach. And I think like the challenge is like when a dynamic shifts, it takes a while for everybody else to move with it. The economic
Yeah.
graph is shifting. People are trying to figure out, and for whatever reason, I'm usually a couple steps ahead, or at least I have been since the LinkedIn days of where things are going. And at this point, I would say I can see the trending, like how things are moving. And that's been a little bit of a gift in the approach that I've taken with my own professional path.
One of the things that I think of when I think about you is how you've worked with entrepreneurs for so many years, what you think they value the most when as it relates to the communities that they want to be a part of.
Here's the beautiful thing about entrepreneurs. They are the same everywhere on the planet. They have the same primary needs, and I outlined them earlier, but they need funding, talent, customer acquisition, knowledge share, mentorship. That's it. The challenge is the environments around them. So whether it's a university or a city or a state or a country, there are varying degrees of what support you get in each one of those categories in every country around the world. But the interesting thing is, like, I've broken down, I think, 4 things that universities specifically need to do to change to be able to engage with where AI is taking them. I think all communities have gone through the roof because people are going to be craving authentic, trusted relationships.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like that's almost like where we were 60 years ago, and we're like flashing back to it dramatically, and it's technology that's driving that need and interest. And so I think universities figuring out how to do lifelong engagement, or any organization, nonprofits, whatever group are around them, whatever communities they're attached to, figuring out how to develop lifelong engagement that's meaningful for those people, those organizations will reap the rewards long term.
Do you find it scary? You seem like someone who's never concerned at all. You just like sort of embrace the moment and can see the future and you react. But I don't know, like how do you feel about where we are right now?
We rolled out an AI prompt build a business in our platform. And the first time I did it in front of students was in Ireland at Dublin City University. And one of the students in the audience was building a whiskey brand, like literally building it. And so I took his insights and his prompts, and we built a company in 3 minutes. I understand technology, but I'm not a technologist. Maybe a futurist, right? But not a technologist. And the fact that I could do that in front of an audience real time, and now we've done it again and again and again, like it goes back to like we were talking about students may not have all the experience to generate a business out of, but we just became a playground, a sandbox that they can build any business they can dream of. Some of those are going to work, some of those aren't. But when I saw that, I'm like, that's future. Like, I get that. I understand exactly where it's going. I'm not worried about AI in the way I think most people are. But at the end of the day, and if I can reiterate anything on this podcast, personal relationships will matter more than ever over the next decade. So that's the thing to lean into as you try to figure out how to navigate what AI is to you.
Or do you ever worry like people shouldn't start businesses? I guess it depends on the risk, right?
I mean, so like this goes back to inclusiveness of the idea of business or what entrepreneurship is. I would argue that every single person who's working right now is an entrepreneur. They're having to position themselves as a product. They sell themselves every single day. They're either effective or they're not. If they're not, they have to figure out other ways to do it. That's iteration. Every human being acts as an individual entrepreneur in some way, shape, or form. I think that the difference is where professional pathing is going. So say 25% of white collar positions are eliminated in the next 2 to 5 years, which could happen. If that's the case, you have to figure out how to fill the bucket. That bucket is filled through entrepreneurship. The development of, well, I think it's actually threefold. I think it's entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurial mindset is important on that. I think we're going to see a heavy shift to flex employment, which means that you come in, work on a product, and come out. So like it's almost like the maturation of the gig economy. And then I think that deep skills are going to be beneficial for the next decade alone. So subject matter expertise, thought leadership will be sought after for a number of different reasons. And so, like I think what this does is it opens up the door for generalists, and it also opens up the door for like those people who have deep expertise and are almost those T personalities, both of which we've been talking about in higher education for 20 years.
Yeah.
Those people who are well-rounded are effective at finding entry-level positions, and those people with deep expertise generally are drawn into opportunity. And those things still exist. And again, like I think with AI, the easy thing is to become fearful. I think the harder thing is to lean into it, to actually see what it looks like in the belly of the beast. And it's not as bad as I think people are viewing it, partly because they're viewing it as, is it going to cost my job?
Right.
Not, is it going to change my life?
It's definitely going to change your life. As to whether or not it's going to cost you your job, I guess that's still out there.
Every student through entrepreneurial support classroom engagement learns how to build a business. Every student graduates with a sustainable income. So ROI of education, like that's the 50,000 foot. Like if I can hit that, I can retire, go walk on a beach. Like you'll never see me again. So I know higher education across the world. And I think that there are 4 things that have become like crystal clear for me. And then one that I don't know how to fix, but I think universities have to figure out, and then one that they have to stop doing. So if you start with the thing that they need to fix is curricular review usually takes a year. So what students are learning in the classroom is always a year behind. It's not 100% true. Like they structure it a little bit different on how they approach it, but like as they're aligning classes for majors, right, or fields of study, it's generally what's happening. If you're taking a year to do something, yet AI is changing something daily, you're 365 days behind as soon as you finish that process. And they've got to shift that. And the traditional 4-year degree, I don't know if that's the structure anymore. And those are the things I can't fix. Like now bench that. The first thing that I see that I think universities need to do is horizontalize aptitude of AI. So right now, in most universities, there's a committee talking about AI and how it integrates through curriculum or engagement with students. A lot of it's being viewed as how do we stop students from using AI, which just stop doing that, right? But the idea is like that's a verticalization of who owns AI at an institution. You have to horizontalize AI. It has to cut through every faculty, student, every administrator on campus. They have to have a general aptitude of it. You're not going to survive unless you start to do that. Purdue's the first school that I've seen that's done a general aptitude for students for graduation. They announced it in November of last year. It is a huge step in the right direction. I think the second thing is if you have more students who are going to have less likelihood of getting a job traditionally post-graduation, you have to take entrepreneurial mindset, which is driven by the Entrepreneurship Center, entrepreneurial curriculum right now. And then you also have to horizontalize that. So every student has some level of entrepreneurial mindset attached to what they're learning in the classroom. All right. And, part of that is critical thinking skills, which should be taught anyway. But like there's an extra aspect of this on how do you position something? How do you develop something? How do you sell something? Whatever that your entrepreneurship centers are doing at a very good clip, but they're not hitting enough students. They're hitting a small percentage of students. So then I look at career services, and I came out of career services just like you did. I love my career services friends. But they're quickly up against something that they're not prepared for. And if more people are losing jobs, and we saw the first appreciable downtick in placement rates in June of last year, if more students are losing those entry-level positions, you have to fill the bucket in a different way. If it's entrepreneurship, it makes sense to collide career services and entrepreneurship. It makes sense to make that something that's holistic. And right now they're completely separate. But there's a there that's a structural thing from an institutional level. And then the last one, which I talked about a little bit earlier briefly, is alumni communities. Important creating micro networks, like affiliate networks within that grouping, flex employment, just continuing education, and most of the large scale schools, like schools we were connected to, UVA, Michigan State, they're focused on athletics. They've got to shift that model. And so now this gets into the last thing that I think universities need to stop because the world has changed. They need to get out of the infrastructure race. It's not the game anymore. And you're building buildings for something that might not exist 5 to 10 years from now in the way that it does now.
Just a couple minutes left here, John. You've been to a bunch of universities. Aside from your alma mater, Michigan State, which one has the best vibe?
So I will tell you the favorite experiences that I had walking out the executive center at Pepperdine, looking at Cascade into Malibu Beach. Not normal, and if I went to school there, I wouldn't have gone to class. Palm Drive in Stanford, nothing like it. The vibe of the campus. My wife worked there, so I spent a ton of time there. You stumble in a basement and you see the original Google server built out of Legos, like just surreal things. Unbelievable. On the East Coast, Bowdoin, I was there in winter, late winter, snow coming down into the pine trees. Students were incredible. It felt like straight out of a 1950s movie. Those are the ones that stick out. But I've had so many good experiences at so many different universities. It's hard for me to pick just one.
Last question. Who is someone or what is something that you think is a great professional resource for anyone listening to this podcast?
So I negotiated a partnership between Blackstone Charitable Foundation's Launchpads, which were entrepreneurial center support from a financial perspective that Blackstone gave to Cornell, USC, UCLA, UT Austin, NYU. And we brought Techstars network education event structure in to work with the startups who are coming out of there. And our idea was potential deal flow from campus. It was a good thing for us. As part of it, we built a toolkit for all entrepreneurs. And it's techstars.toolkit. But we built this with the best education available, the best speakers, the best talent, the best mentors that we had in the Techstars network globally, speaking in each one of those categories. And If I'm a startup, it is gold. Is a step-by-step process of how to build a business. And so anybody listening here who's trying to hone entrepreneurial skills, trying to like figure out how to navigate the world of AI, this is like the simplest step you can take, is to go through this resource and learn from these experts. And they're all friends of mine. I know them all well. And I, every time I interact with them, learn something from them. They act as a quasi like mentor board for me. And so like I know that this insight would be good for your listeners or the people on this podcast. But yeah, it's it is awesome having the opportunity to engage with you. And continuing conversation over a decade is just surreal cool.
Thank you for your time, John. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everyone listening. Hope you enjoyed episode 1 of Speaking Engagement with John Hill. Be sure to check out the bonus content this week, articles that are going to connect with John's interview and some follow-up podcasts. It's the conference that never sleeps. So we're going to have follow-up content for each interview, and we'll start here with John. So thank you for listening.